So first of all, I want to have a little bit of endorsement for the event sponsor, Cover Genius. Thank you, Cover Genius, for providing the event space, food, drinks, and the equipment. If you would like to know more about Cover Genius, please come talk to me or Autumn over there later. Also, we are hiring right now for a senior Python software engineer role for the data team, and an analytic engineer and a data platform engineer. If you're interested, come talk to me or Autumn later, or Lihan.
Yeah, to Lihan straight
over there.
I don't know anything about roles.
Thank you. And today we are going to have two major talks, and after that we are going to have 3 lightning talks. Now I'm going to introduce what lightning talks are. So lightning talks is basically really short talks. They're about 5 to 10 minutes. They'll be quick and efficient. It requires less preparation, and they're better suited for less experienced speakers. And because of all these reasons, we can cover a variety of topics in a very short time. Here are some examples of what you can talk about in lightning talks. You could introduce a new library, a tool, or a concept. You could showcase a project that or an app that you have built. You could share some tips and tricks about Python. You could demonstrate coding, testing, or debugging techniques. Or you could share some insights or discovery, or really, if anything you find interesting. And then I'm going to hand the mic to Autumn to talk about our next event.
All right. Hey guys, I want to announce the next event that will happen on September 25th. So it will be not at this location. So Cover Genius is happy to provide us with event space further, but we actually want to, just demonstrate that this event is not about Cover Genius. Cover Genius is supporting, sponsoring us, but we want to do this at a different location next time. It will be at Microsoft Reactor. This location is actually, even better than Cover Genius office. It's straight at the Vineyard Station. You just go get outside of the elevator and you're straight in the building that you need. And you go to level 10 or 11, I can't remember right now. And they provide a very good venue, a very good event space. And that event will be sponsored by Co-Talent. So we have Aaron here and Rob. Sorry, mate. We have Aaron and Rob from Co-Talent here. So Co-Talent is a recruitment company, and they're gonna sponsor the next event. And if you're looking for a job, you can speak to Aaron and Rob. They'll be here, I guess, all night, and yeah, and hopefully stay for after party too. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So 25th of September, and that lightning talks format that Aaron mentioned, we want to encourage all of you to do more lightning talks. So if you have anything interesting that you are happy to share with the community, it doesn't need to be like too technical, it doesn't need to be super complicated, but if you just can put a few slides together and speak for 5 to 10 minutes about your idea, that will be very good for the community. This is what we're looking for. We want people to freely share their ideas, to get feedback, maybe to kind of showcase what they built, things like that. So we probably will still have some proper talks, like proper long talks, let's put it in this way. But this lightning talk format doesn't require much preparation, and hopefully we will be able to do more of them. Even like one day before the event, you can prepare the slides speak. If you ever went to PyCon, this is the format that they use at Python conference, and I think that's probably my favorite part of the conference as well. And this is something that we want to kind of do more at SyDjango as well. That said, I'll probably hand over mic to our first speaker, David. I know he has an exciting talk today.
Thank you. Everyone, let's get this. How do we go here? We just this guy here. And
Inception.
very exciting, isn't it? Okay, where are we? And you've probably all seen this cryptic title. Thanks for being here tonight. According to the program, my name is David Eldridge, and I'm here to tell you how I managed to send a few modest waves around the planet from Japan using Django and a few words of Icelandic. First, I'm going to talk a bit about my journey as a developer, and then about a current Django project that I'm building. This is a slightly different type of talk, perhaps a little less technical, but my hope is that we'll engage beyond pure coding and development with a little bit of a sort of a Django-y consulting vibe thrown in. So there's quite a lot to cover in only 3 hours, including an intermission. That was meant to be a joke, but I'll give it a good go. So here's a quick intro to yours truly. So I'll do this the old-fashioned way. Okay. I was born at a very young age and lived in an Aboriginal settlement in the Northern Territory until I was 7. Of course, this is largely irrelevant, but I love to start with a bang. At the age of about 12, I commissioned my first coding project, a simple basic routine written on a pocket TSR-80, and I've got it here with me, for a plasterer to help minimize waste when cutting plaster sheeting. Given I probably didn't have a very solid grasp of spatial optimization at that age, I'm not sure how effective it was. However, at that time, I was very happy to trade a significant chunk of my life for a few bucks. Moving on from my childhood, I worked for 7 years at Macquarie Applied Finance in the 90s, and I wrote software to enhance the delivery of their master's program across Australasia, including a data-driven course scheduling facility used by 500 students in SQL Server and Microsoft Word with VBA. Apparently, it was a world first in education. I suspect it was also a world last. I was then poached to write the back-end systems for giftVouchers.com in the so-called .com era in the 90s. So using Visual Basic 6 with ASP, I'm showing a bit of age here, we managed to achieve a few world firsts, including live voucher redemption across the FPOS system. After about 18 months, the innovation curve flattened, and so I left Gift Vouchers to start my own business, forfeiting a significant share ownership only a few weeks before they sold the company for some big 8 figures, demonstrating my exceptional business timing. I then partnered with a mate from uni and we built Microsoft-based data products, including patient monitoring and clinical systems, growing to a team of 13 developers. I had unwittingly become, and my apologies to Aaron and Rob, an HR director. Not wanting to be an HR director, as it turns out, I sold my share of the business to pursue the black art of management consulting with a longtime friend and mentor from McKinsey. And this is how I started to see myself after a while. But this is actually how I was seen by the rest of the world. Management consultants are often described as rats swimming furiously towards a sinking ship. I probably went a bit far. Okay. For 15 years, we consulted to mines and corporations in Australia, New Guinea, Canada, and the US, largely on CEO-level strategy. I was the numbers guy and also developed dozens of early prototypes of management tools that we designed. We did occasional pro bono work for not-for-profits, including the Wayside Chapel, which is an amazing organisation. Over this period, I was away from home for 3 to 5 months of the year. And somehow during that time, and with a little bit of help from my wife, I manufactured 2 children, and soon after decided to become a stay-at-home dad and support my wife's brilliant career. That's the pie. As wonderful as it was also a very challenging time for me, as I found it increasingly difficult to revalue my contribution to both our family and society. However, during this period, I got involved with a bunch of interesting startups and joined the mentoring team at Stone and Chalk, which was that was good fun. But over all that time, I've always enjoyed Python and the study of Django. Got to keep it relevant. So now we're going to move on to, sorry, this paper thing. These are photos, by the way. Thank you, OpenAI. Okay, Icelandic waves in Japan. So back in December, I was introduced to the owner of a business who sells around 25,000 highly specialized tooling products into manufacturing and industry across New Zealand and Australia. Sadly, his longest serving salesman had just had a stroke and died, leaving him to reflect on his staffing vulnerability. Selling into this market requires salespeople with very specific, many years of specific and detailed manufacturing experience, and such people are almost non-existent. So his question to me was, and this became our mission statement, is there a way to leverage technology to simplify our sales process and open the door to salespeople with lower levels of experience? So we're going to have a very quick look at the evolution of this statement. It is something that's grown a bit more than I expected it to. And hopefully some of what I've learned along the way will be of value to some of us here. So we're just going to go through a couple of things. Some of the parameters of the project, what I have to deal with, very familiar to a lot of people here. The process of building an early prototype. I did a first cut Django solution and threw in a little surprise for my client. Then we'll talk about what it meant for the client and why Japan and Iceland are sort of involved at this level. And then I'll throw in some final thoughts. So here's a bit of an overview of the project. There's about 25,000 different products and about 25 classes or categories of products, and each one has its own unique set of attributes. And they're sourced from 15 global suppliers. Each one of them has their own product code format. This brings with it some challenges. These stock codes are used as primary keys in all their systems. Every supplier has its own format of its stock code, and they had duplicate stock codes, so duplicate primary keys, which is something that you come across every now and then. It's quite horrific. And so that brought about some philosophical questions about how tightly integrated do I want this solution to be with their back-end systems? Probably not very. So we decided that we'd take one of these product classes and we'd build an early prototype. And so here it is, and here it is. And it's built in Excel. I've built prototypes for years and years using Excel. It's amazing. In fact, a little story, a friend of mine was setting up an Antarctic, it was a Canadian-owned business, and they had an Antarctic exploration, they had a lot of ships, and they were opening up a Sydney office to cover Australasia, and they said, we have very specific requirements. We want to have a look at a customer management system. We want to design it from the ground up. So we did a little Excel project. It grew and grew, and they ran the whole business out of that. I think they put something like $30 or $40 million worth of sales through it in 5 years before they actually bought a real one. So Excel is actually quite powerful. So what we did here, we took one product, and you can see here, these are all dependent attributes, and these are the attributes for this particular product, which happens to be taps. And these aren't the taps that you have in the bathroom. These are taps that bore holes into materials. And as you go through, you can see that it actually filters the product. And for my client, this was magical. They'd never seen their data in this form, and it was easy for him to grasp. It was clearly unattractive. And that's one of the points here. If you want to sell a functional concept to somebody, always produce something in a timely fashion that doesn't look too flash, because they think they're paying a lot of money for aesthetics, which is really irrelevant to the decision making. From that, he said, let's go, let's write something. And I thought, well, why don't I do it in Django? I'm going to all these Django nights. Everyone seems to be pretty excited about it. So I did. So here's the where are we? It is here somewhere. Sorry, guys. Here we go. Back to the. So as a shout out to Roadrunner, I've renamed the site. This is running locally, just to give my client a little bit of confidentiality at this point. So philosophically, I was just writing one tool, but I've put it in a band there and said data tools. So that's the idea there is, well, maybe there's other tools we could write. So that's a little bit of sort of prompting of my client. And he's already thinking of other tools to fill into that space. I'll just log in. I always want them to feel like their data is secure. And hopefully I've put the right, there we go. And yes, there is another tool there. So you're all hot developers. Nothing here is very exciting, but for the client, it's pretty profound. So we can just do the same query that we had before. This is all live data. We can just filter as we go. And I wanted him to play around with this stuff with his staff, and let's see if we can find. And then this probably is more all that he needed, and at no cost to him, I decided I'd add a few little things just to get them thinking. And so if you click on any of these, it comes up with some information, and they can have anything. This is all randomly generated. You can see the data in a slightly different format. You can download technical brochures if you wish. And I put this link here, and at this stage, we haven't really been talking about integrating their CRM, but this was just basically a little primer. So if you put in a number, and you can put in nothing if you like, and I've used the sleep function to give it that feeling that it's connecting to a database. Here we go. We've got a little, again, there's no rocket science here, but for my client, it was profound. It's thinking, oh, maybe our salespeople can have, access in the one system to our enterprise knowledge. And of course, you want to see the orders. This took me 10 minutes to write. There's a completely randomly generated customer order, but again, it's about getting the concept over. So that was pretty exciting for my customer. And he then went and showed this product to his sales team around Australia. And they all said, wow, let's do it. Let's get rid of our CRM. Let's get rid of this. Let's put it all into this one system. Of course, that leaves me thinking, well, no, it's just me. Very flattering. And so I put on a little bit of a curveball, and I put in another tool, and that's this guy here. And in my experience, I've worked for a lot of companies over the years. Senior management love to just play with their numbers, and BI tools have come a long way since, in the recent years, but there are still a lot of people who they feel like they're a long way from getting the numbers that they want. And the idea here is that my customer could have a little bit of a play with English and access data. So we can just, for example, and this uses Vanna, which I'll talk about in a moment. If you submit this, it goes off to ChatGPT. That's all been cached, of course. And there's some data, of course. You can open it as a CSV if you wish. All pretty straightforward stuff. But again, for my customer, he'd never seen anything quite like that. So I'll have a little bit of a side talk. This is the most technical part of the talk. Vanna, if you haven't heard of it, it's a very easy way to generate SQL queries. You put in your search, you've already trained it with your DDL schemas, you've thrown in some documentation. It gives you can store it in a vector store anywhere you like, or they have a free one. And when you register, you get access to their vector store. Then when you send it a question, it compiles only the relevant vectors to the question that you've sent it, sends that off to whatever LLM you point it to, and in this case it was GPT-4. And so you're keeping your token count down, and it's very fast, and then it can comes back as in the form of a SQL query, and it can then present it in graph form or whatever you like. I tend to just use data frames, but if anyone's interested in a lightning talk on that, it's a very quick way of getting some natural language querying going, and it's so far it seems to be quite robust. So the customer, he liked that. He thought that was pretty exciting, and then he flew off to Japan. So we're off to Japan. And if anyone's put that into their Google Translate, they will know that it kind of looks like let's all jump in the car, crank up the stereo, drive up the N10 for a lager. But in fact, and I'll show you here, we've got, if you put it into Google Translate, it's just whoops, here we go, sorry. It's just a standard query against his database. And we've trained the database to understand what all of this means. And there's some more complexity in there, which I won't go into today. So he was able to put this, and I'll put it into where are we? We'll go back to, here we go. He quite enjoyed being able to do something like this. So if we copy this, and he showed this to the Japanese, and let's say we turn it into Punjabi. And so he was in Japan at a global conference of the salespeople for his company. It's about a $30 billion Japanese manufacturing company. And they'd never seen their data in the form that we had it, and they'd not used this before. And he was actually asked to present this to the global conference. And everybody said, we want this tool. Not just this one. We want to be able to work through our data in this way. And we'll just pop that in there. And hopefully this will work. There you go. So it's converted full Punjabi, and in the training I had to tell it that any of the keywords that come up in a different language have to be converted to English first, so that the SQL statement, and this is the SQL statement here, so that the SQL statement will make sense against the database. So Vanna it's been pretty exciting. All right. So I'm not sure. I met with my client on Monday, and from what is a fairly simple bit of an interface, it's been a profound changer for them. So their client and the sales team, they love the responsive nature. It's all done in Bootstrap. It's very responsive. They like the idea of being able to talk to their mobile. So we'll probably add a little bit of voice querying. We're going to go beyond the product data. We'll probably be doing some natural language queries across their enterprise systems. And I'm a bit scared of the last one. They do want to integrate. They want to get rid of some of their existing platforms and rewrite it in Django. So I might be talking to some recruiters at some point. And the parent Japanese company is looking at rolling this whole search facility into their global distributor network. So that's pretty exciting, and it just shows how amazing Django is. You know, for someone like me who's not I haven't been writing it for 10 years, can come up with something that is profoundly game changing for somebody. So a couple of thoughts on this. Consulting 101, always be very, very clear on the problem statement. So the customer is always very happy if you stick to the game. Build a quick and dirty prototype in a familiar environment. You guys would do it faster in Django than I would, but for me, Excel seems to do the job. Get good runs on the board quickly at low cost. And so my client and I, we built a good rapport over about 3 months, and I felt that I had permission to introduce some new directions for him, and that seems to have worked very well. Django most certainly doesn't suck. For me, it's proven to be very, enabling. and I'm very, very grateful to these guys for running these sessions. And this is a different level of abstraction. There's about 100,000 Australian SMEs with revenues above 5 million, and roughly half of them are revenues above 10 million. And almost none of them have any idea how to leverage AI. And in fact, my client said that he'd had an AI expert come in to say, here's how you can use it in your business. And he said, look, to be honest with you, yeah, looked great. Didn't really strike any chords. It wasn't until he could actually play with his own numbers and mess around with his own data. So that's profound. And it's really, with something like Vanna, if you have a client who's thinking about it, you can knock something up in a few hours, and it gives them something, you know, that's real to them. And the last bit is go get them. Anyway, thank you very much. Any questions?
Yeah, sure. I think I'll go first. So I think that, like, you did talk about query training. Curious to see how that process works, like just the query training.
Yeah, sure. So I've got.
Could you repeat
Oh, so how I trained Vanna, is that it, that the question?
Yes.
Okay. So just I've got a Jupyter Lab here, so I'll just run it. So I just did it in Jupyter Lab. You do it in anything. Here we go. All right. All right, so what we do is we make the connection to Vanna. You can see up the top there. I can. How's that? There you go. So you create what's that? Yeah. Go for your life. You can remember, if anyone can remember that, it's fair game. I'll just hide it just because there's some smart people in this room. And you instantiate Vanna, and then all you have to do is do some training. So there's really three ways that you train it in your with DDLs. So I've just pulled out some. I just pulled out the schema of the tables that I'm using, and I've just sent that. I've sent that in the VN train DDL equals DDL. You can see that. Then there's document training. So I've just added some lines, like there are multiple product classes, including taps class has taps in the table name, etc. So I describe the data in a wordy fashion, and that's quite important. I also included a little bit of reference data. So, and I'm not giving, one of the keys here is that none of the proprietary information goes outside, and Vanna allows you to query locally. And so you don't have to send any data. And if you do send data, you send, so here, these are just, these are keywords that are used in reference tables. So I've sent them off to say that here's how they need to appear. If there's another language, so here for all languages, make sure to match the following search keys for each table listed in English, which is why I could convert that Punjabi or the Icelandic into something that the system would understand. And then what you want to do is you want to send it some sample queries. And so I would send it, you send it the question and then the SQL that matches it. So these have been pre-tested. And so you can train this as much as you like, and then you can actually ask it to, you can remove queries, or you can add more documentation, but you only do this once up front. And you don't have to package everything and send it with every prompt. And it's brilliant. It gives you a lot of control over how you approach this. And I haven't really gone into that, but out of the box, it worked very quickly for me. I don't know if that actually answers your question, but.
Oh, yes, it does, because I was just wondering if this is something that it was auto-generating, but it seems that, Vanna is kind of like trying to map the prompt onto all of these trained queries, and then using that to extract the results?
Yeah.
Or does it actually edit these smartly?
I think, no, I think it's, I think it's meant to be a bit smarter than that. So it throws everything into a giant vector store of its own, or you can have your own vector store if you like. And then it will, I believe it will only pull out the chunks that are relative to the query. And it's got its own, I presume, some Euclidean distance algorithm that, or some proximity algorithm that pulls out the relevant data. And then it just packages that. So if I was to package everything there, I could be 10, 12, 20,000 tokens a time. But most of these queries are sort of more like 2,000 or 3,000. And that's significant if you're running thousands of queries. So at my level with ChatGPT, I think they're running about 6 or 7 cents per query. So, but happy to, if anyone wants a lightning talk, and I can do things quickly, tonight's probably not the best example of that. I'm very happy to do it. Thank you. Sharing. Sure.
All right, thank you, David, for a great talk. Coming up, we have our next speaker, Iqbal, to tell us a little bit about ASGI.
All right, and join the. This is my work laptop. Ouch. Okay, I was on this selected it has been on. So, awesome. Hey, so yeah, so that was a very good talk by Dave. So prepared to be disappointed. This is nowhere as cool. So this is a talk that's around, so let's just rewind a little bit, in companies like Google and Microsoft and, these big companies, they've got like 80,000 developers, 80,000 contractors. You guys wonder what they all do? They're just kind of like maintaining existing things. Most of them, maybe like 2,000-3,000 people make new stuff, and then 98% of the other people just maintain existing things. And if you guys have like joined companies with larger code bases, or sometimes you get into the company and you look at a piece of code or you observe something that you can't explain. And sometimes, like, how many people over here have actually joined a company where code has been commented as "do not touch"? Have you guys ever seen that in your life?
And then when you touch it, then basically things just start breaking. I'll just go back into my past, like, when I was very new to C++, and I used to write C++ on Windows. And, it's like, I think when I was in the first semester of my college, and this is 2002, it's like I had this very, very funky kind of behavior where if my program exceeded around like 1,500 lines, it would just randomly terminate. And I'd isolated it down to, I used to use this function call in C++ used called strcpy, and I used to pass it like so there's source, which is a string, which is, which is basically a pointer. I'm not sure if you guys have heard about a pointer. It's just a memory address where, a string of characters is written. And then I'd give it like a destination pointer. And what would end up happening is that it would go and write stuff over, basically where anything in Windows might be residing. The program might crash, Windows might crash. You can get a blue screen of death because, and on Linux, you can get a sec fault, right? So the thing is that, it's like quite a lot of times, it's like when you have this impetus that you don't understand something, and when you don't understand something, if you just ignore it, it's going to come back and it's going to bite you much harder. So this this talk is not about C++. So, it's like just don't get worried. If you guys haven't touched C++ or pointers, stay away from that kind of stuff if you can. This is more of a Django talk. So this is, it's like there was this company that I joined, actually not joined, like there's this company from my past. And over there, it's like they had this configuration. I mean, all of you guys probably have used Django in some shape or form, and you all know that, it's like Django gets deployed inside a server. It could be, Gunicon, Uvicon, all of this kind of stuff. And, it's like because Django is like, so quick question for everybody. Can Django run multiple concurrent requests if you're using the ORM? Like, yeah. So, all right, is Python a concurrent language? Or to some extent, right? So Python has async, and some people over here might have played around with async. Some people might not have, right? But the thing is that, it's like, but Django does support something called async views, which means that, it's like you can go, so, all right, let me just basically rewind back a little bit. When you're making a web request to a URL, right, if an external site takes a second, it'll take that second, it will and then after that, you'll get the response, your process will continue. Inside an async world, what you can do is that you can run multiple requests in parallel, and you can let Python context switch to something else, right? And move on. So that's the kind of problem that we had over here, where, according to my mental model, our servers were severely underspec'd. And when, it's like we were actually running things seemed much more performant than they actually were. And, it's like in Gunicon, you use something called a WSGI server, right? And inside a WSGI server, what happens is that, a request comes in, it gets assigned to a worker. A worker is actually the process forking itself. So, the Gunicon process will actually make another, spawn out another process, and that process will serve the request. So it's not basically multi-threading, it's multi-processing, which is quite expensive in the scheme of things. And it's also one of the big criticisms of Python. And what ends up happening is that, it's like every worker can, execute one web request, and then at the end of which basically things will go on. Now, of course, like if you've got a maximum number of workers configured inside your configuration, and you get hammered with more requests coming in than your workers can handle, eventually, those requests will be placed inside a queue. That queue will run out, and people will start getting denial, just denied statuses like server busy, and the whole system will choke. And sometimes that's a good thing. Now the thing is that, it's like the problem that I was facing is that there was a configuration where we had one processor,
just one concurrency configured on a Uvicorn server. Now, it was just one instance of Unicorn just running one process, but it was serving more than one concurrent request at the same time. And that didn't sit right with my mental model. And so, it's like I was worried everybody else was happy. People were like, yay, Python's so damn performant. Things are really amazing. Django is the bomb. People just, and like, it's just that because I was working with this new bunch of people and they were all very bullish on this. So, it's like, I was kind of like feeling insecure. And I think a lot of you people feel insecure where, you kind of like have this, this set of how things can work well. People will challenge your worldview. They won't be able to explain why. You'll feel gaslighted and you'll shut up, right? But the thing is that basically as an engineer, you need to kind of like challenge, you need to ask for answers, ask for an explanation. If people don't explain, then, it's like it's, either a workplace culture problem, you guys should move on, or you should prepare to educate, take ego out of the equation, come on the same table, try to kind of like, try to figure out what's actually going on. Now, the thing is that, it's like, so what I done was that, I'd taken a copy of this code, run it on my system, and this was like my day one with this particular company. So I'd kind of like taken the code, I was running it on my local computer, and I kind of like set up some benchmarks. I was like, if I set up, some views just to test things, all synchronous operations should block, right? So there's no way in the world that it's like I should be able to run two time.sleeps together. Time.sleep is something that causes a context switch. But if you're only running one web process, then if I go back to this diagram, if I only have one worker configured, then it should wait for the first worker to finish if I have a time.sleep, and then it should move to the other one. Just for everybody's information, time.sleep just kind of like asks the Python interpreter to kind of like sleep for 1 second and then continue. Similarly, it's like I had this thing where there was this thing where, it's like you can actually have a sleep inside a database query. So there were different types of synchronous operations that I'd set up. And then, it's like I kind of like wanted to set up a benchmark. And what happened inside my benchmark was, this is the time.sleep benchmark. It was just a simple time.sleep inside the request body where I was taking the ID of the thread. I was just time.sleeping a little bit, and then I was responding. And then the second one was, it's like, I can't see all of this thing here, but, it's like this over here is a database get and a time.sleep. So select for update, what it does is that it locks something inside the database. So what you can do is that you can actually say that, hey, I am now like if you guys remember, there were a lot of blockchain, banks that used to have a lot of issues. It was because people didn't know how to lock databases, right? And, it's like initial versions of MongoDB did not actually have very good transactional concurrency primitives, due to which, it's like you'd kind of like have balances. People could exploit these things in certain ways in order to basically just like, get out more money and have a lower account balance, right? In order to avoid that, what you do is that you like lock the balance inside the customer's account. And then, it's like you carry out your transaction and then you update the balance afterwards. So if you guys haven't used select for update inside Django, that is a very big problem. And, you guys should use this stuff, because this kind of like says that, hey, I am using this, every other thread, every other guy, leave it alone until I'm done. So yeah, if this is the only thing you guys take out of this talk, I've achieved my mission. Moving on. All right. So this was the second type of synchronous operation, or somewhat, right? And then the third time was the third one was, it's like just atomic transaction lock row. again, this is just another, like, these were just like a couple of more things that I'd taken. And then there was a random lock. And with the random lock, it's like, I was just thinking that, it's like, if it's a random position taken from somewhere, then the chances of it colliding are probably lower. So I just wanted to, set up this thing just to set up a narrative around it. And then this is a sleep in the database. So Postgres also has a sleep function called pg_sleep. And, you can kind of like within a transaction, you can ask Postgres to go to sleep, and, it can waste time on your behalf. And the cool thing over here is that, it's like I kind of like run some shitty benchmarks using Apache AB. And, it's like the thing is that I had two configurations. Our prod was running off of Daphne, and I kind of like ran things off of Daphne using one worker. And, it's like over in these first two things, I saw that it was exceeding 1 request per second, right? And everywhere where I was locking, I was getting things to sleep for a while, so it couldn't have gone beyond 1 request per second. So, there were a lot of WTFs in here, right? So this shouldn't have exceeded 1 request per second. That means that there's something wrong with my mental model. Either I don't know what I'm doing, which is probably right, usually right, or, it's like there's something wrong with the setup. And in order to kind of like take myself out of the equation, I kind of like ran the same thing with Geonicon, because we didn't use async views inside our code base at all. Geonicon should have performed similarly if everything was okay. And with Geonicon, it's like things were basically like ceilinged at 1 request a second, which means that, it's like at least there's some order in the universe. And, it's like at least like, I'm not crazy. Maybe I'm only half crazy. And then, it's like you're like, and then you, at times like this where, it's like 1 person versus 8 engineers, you're having this conversation with yourself, and like, you're like, okay, fine, Iqbal, you're full of shit. And then Iqbal's talking to himself and saying, I am, but, and then Iqbal's saying, retire, resign, let the younger people take over. And then, it's like, stop taking jobs that belong to young people, and the Django community is your friend. And Iqbal 3 is my best friend. He's like the person who comes and helps me whenever, I have feelings of insecurity. And before, it's like getting into things, we talked about, your traditional WSGI process model, at least my mental model, and there might be some gaps inside this. So the thing is that inside ASGI, what happens is slightly different, right? In ASGI, because, it's like it's a ASGI is an asynchronous server gateway interface. And this was kind of like a gateway interface that was defined so that, Python can run async views. Now, Django can run async views. The thing with async views is that, you can kind of like, the server can kind of like pause while waiting for IO, and then, let something else take over. And IO can be of many forms, right? It could be IO happening with, a web server. It could be IO happening against the database. And as of today, the production versions of Django aren't like, the ORM aren't capable of async, right? So as a form of protection, there's a, if an async view is getting run, then what happens is that, this procedure runs with the, with every 100 ticks. Ticks are basically, something that represents CPU cycles. And, it's like after which there's a context switch that happens between the main thread, the main thread, and, it's like some operational space given inside the main thread for your async view to run. Now, the idea is that, a lot of things, like things that you run async are not processor intensive. So that's why, it's like a process, when you're using a chat process, you can like take on like 20,000 concurrent chat clients in one connection, because those are very, very, for a processor, that's very, very less amount of work. What's a lot for us is like negligible for a CPU in most cases. However, whenever you've got an ORM query running, now that's something which, Django runs in the thread sensitive context, right? And if thread sensitive is, on, I mean, if the thing is thread sensitive and Django thinks that this is not a thread safe operation, it will actually, run it inside the main thread, and it will not let multi-threading happen inside, an ASCII server like Daphne. If it's not thread sensitive, it will, outsource that to another thread, because it knows that, there's no chance all of the resources that are being used in order to, run this web request. It knows that it knows that all of the resources that are being used to run this web request are not going to, cause any issues, because, if the ORM isn't being used, if something that's not thread safe isn't being used, that won't cause issues down the line. And then, it's like I kind of like had this thing where, I mean, Joe Armstrong is a very big legend of mine. He's the guy who created Erlang, in case anybody doesn't know. And he's very humble. If you hear any of his talks, he like takes things back to the basics. And that's generally what is really important. And then, it's like when I came down to, I went through, it's like all of these open source, forums, and also Django's own issue tracker to kind of like find something similar. And I found this bug that says that why are synchronous views handled sequentially and not concurrently? So this, like, if this issue had been closed, that itself would have been a bug, right? And this is Carlton Gibson, who's somebody who's, working inside, he used to be a Django fellow, and he's the guy who made a couple of really cool packages for Django, like Crispy Forms, Awesome Django, and he was a DRF fellow as well. And he kind of like explains this entire thread sensitive behavior, and he says that, hey, that's why it's not running concurrently. And then now I have got this fact that says that, it's like it should have been bound in that context. However, that's not what everything is. That's not how the tests were behaving. And then, it's like that was frustrating me even more, because it's supposed to perform like shit and it isn't. And why doesn't this code perform shit? And then, it's like after that, I kind of like went through the documentation, and it says so inside the ASCII ref, which is, this thing that Django uses, it kind of like has this environment variable that says Django allow async unsafe true. And this was set to true before version 3.3.0. It was set to, false, right? So it was a bad default, right? So what ended up happening was that, when I went and looked at the requirements, somebody way in the past of the company had locked a ASCII ref, maybe because it was being used by some other dependency, and it was just a bad default. And the moment, it's like I upgraded ASCII ref to the latest version, and I ran the benchmarks again, all of a sudden, everything was slow again. There was order in the universe again. And, it's like the Daphne with one worker was not going up to like 1.97. It was, just constraining itself to 0.95. And this was really cool, right? If we'd let this alone, what might have happened is that because the ORM was not thread safe, that would have meant that, it's like you might have had corrupted data, and, it's like that's not a good place to be in, for sure. And yeah, like I think that and then, it's like stability is greater than performance. And I think that that's kind of like pretty much the gist of the talk, that, sometimes you don't understand things, that's okay. Build a mental model, share it with other people, try to explain what's going on, try to measure things, try to prove your hypothesis. And, it's like if your model does not conform to your hypothesis, one of them is wrong, just don't comment the code or just don't accept that and move on. This was a financial services company. So, it's like, luckily it was inside friends and family release when, this thing was identified and rectified. So no production user ever got to see this thing. So yeah, I guess that's about it. So any questions?
If you go back to your ASCII model slide,
Mm-hmm.
in the section where you said that there's a decision to be made as to whether it's thread safe or not, can you expand on how that's decided?
Yeah, so right now, Django, if it's a synchronous view, it just, says that, this is thread sensitive, and it will run it inside the main Python process. Whereas if it's a async view, it will defer it into a thread. So what will happen is that, it's like rather than, because inside GUnicorn, you're using multiprocess, so that's not an issue. Whereas if you use the Django ORM inside a multi-threaded app, that's going to cause issues because the Django ORM is not thread safe. So that's what it's doing. It's just that this thread sensitive variable used to have a bad default in Django, just because ASCII ref was locked to an older version before it had been integrated into the Django code base properly.
Django decided, not Python or ASCII, it's Django deciding.
It's actually, yeah, it's Django determining, and not even Django ASCII ref determining it. And it's like, if I can elaborate a little bit more on this. So what happens is that Django was a synchronous code base, and in order to convert it to be async compatible, there were some methods that were written inside ASCII ref. One method called sync to async, and one method called async to sync. Right. So the thing is that it's like just to kind of like have that compatibility layer. Right. So initially, what happens is that if you try to use even inside an async view, if you try to use a sync function, Django will try to basically use the sync version of it just through that interface. So ASCII ref was actually a compatibility layer that was built to help the transition of Django to ASCII. So it's got like a lot of utility methods inside that. So those methods were integrated before Django was fully async compatible. It isn't async compatible, but you can kind of like change some variables and get Django to act up if you wanted to. Cool. Yes, sir.
More question as well. So what's so if in one Django application you need mix in like sync and the sync views, like what's the recommended way? Is my understanding correct? Is my mental model correct that I need to have like two deployments? One is GUnicorn, another one is Unicorn or performance. Is it the recommended way, or like is there a way to mix sync and sync in a single Django?
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? So if you come and look at the same diagram inside this ASCII ref server, so over here, it's like it will spawn out into external threads all of the other async requests. So the thing is that it's like it will take as many async requests as it can. The thing is that if you run multiple ASCII processes, theoretically it will work just like multiple GUnicorn processes, in the sense that it's like if you're running 4 Daphne processes, they should be able to handle 4 synchronous requests together, and then for asynchronous they'll be able to take many more. Whereas if you ran it through GUnicorn, it would only be able to take one at a time for both sync and async, because GUnicorn just does it. If you threw an async request to GUnicorn, it would use ASCII ref to wrap that up and then basically convert it into a synchronous thing and then run it. Now the thing is that theoretically you can actually only run ASCII multiple processes or Daphne and get away with it. Now, the thing is that because Unicorn is so battle hardened and there's been so much engineering work put into it, and I think that basically Unicorns, it's been optimized so much over time that most people, when they deploy things, they will actually do what, as you say, have a different endpoint, or inside Nginx, they'll identify that this is my asynchronous traffic. They'll route that to Daphne or equivalent or Uvicorn, and all of your sync stuff, they'll route it to Unicorn. So that's kind of like, but just for practical concerns, not theoretical ones. Cool. Awesome. So yeah, like the model of this talk, don't lock your dependencies, at least like test every year with the latest stuff, and B, basically like even if you didn't understand anything, just it's like select for update. Just remember that. Awesome. Cheers.
Okay, cool. Finally. Thank you, guys. Yeah, just starting with the background about me. My name is Oliver. I'm working at Virginia's for 2.5 years. I've been using Django for over 4 years, and also a fan of Fast API, if anyone uses it. And just want to say that again, we are hiring a senior Python developer, and hope you guys can make connect, and so I can get referral bonus as well. Yeah. So my talk for today is optimize serving large data set on Django admin. Maybe just starting with a little bit background about Django admin. So from what I summarize, it's building admin portal providing by Django. So once you install Django, you have this advantage and you can use it. And it helps you automatically generate an interface for your model based on what you config and their fields, etc. It's really convenient in using, searching or editing the database records. I found it much easier to just like go into the production or staging database directly to changing or searching what I need. And plus, it's really easy to customize. You have themes and lots of awesome stuff for operations, etc. I think it's been my favorite part of using Django for a long time. And starting on one of the projects in our team. So in our team, we have a project to capture those user session events on the product website. The main purpose is help to diagnose the user's behaviors, or sometimes we want to troubleshooting some customer-facing issues. And we have a data pipeline to ingest those session ID to a Postgres database. And we build our Django API to serve it and returning those captured session data, focusing on listing and filtering those data. After we launch or releasing for a few weeks, I start to notice a really serious problem. So we have more and more records stored in a database. I think so far, probably more than 10 million records. I think just a few months started already. And the response time of the admin listing page is getting way longer in production, sometimes even in staging. And searching those records, it's kind of like sometimes get timeout and throwing file-free errors when I'm doing this. It's kind of annoying for me. So I decided to try to find out what goes wrong. So I tried to do some local setup, and by the time I also want to share some source code to you, which is the simplified one, not the original one. Yeah, so if you guys cannot see it, here's the Django model. The keyboard is nothing fancy here, just some basic reference views, and we have one data which is serving what we want to capture in the JSON on the user session. And of course, I don't show other sensitive fields to you guys. And The key point is there's nothing really complex. There's no foreign key showing, etc. And here's the admin model. Again, if you're familiar with Django, there's nothing much fancy going on, just really self-explanatory. We have defined search field, what we're going to show on the listing page, and list filtering. And that's it. And in the local sidebar, I use bulk create command to try to create as much as possible records in the machine. So I'm getting 500K records in my local setup, try to amplify the performance issue in local. And I'm also using my favorite debugging tool, which is called Django Debug Tool. If you don't know that, please search it. I love it. And captures some of the performance when I'm doing the listing or searching. Here's what I have. I don't go to too much detail yet because I will do it later. But in summarize, we have 500K records, and the thing is we have 251 milliseconds on listing page and 500 milliseconds on searching the records, even with index field. I think people would just argue that, okay, it's okay, right? Like within 1 second, but like in our production, we probably have 10 times more data, which is even getting slower. Yeah, so that's why I started to try to find a way. So usually I'll start with the worst one, which is the searching part. So I did a little bit research on this. Probably doesn't seem it really clearly, but when you putting any search value in the search box in the Django admin, it will give you some multiple search conditions on this. And I was using the Django admin API docs as a reference, which means that when you put a search fields in the Django admin model, it will actually run the I contains by default. So saying you have like this example, first name, last name, they were just doing this query using I like or I contains, something like that. They will search multiple fields at the same time, which is not really ideal for me because sometimes I already know what this value represent, probably session ID, user ID, etc. I think the existing Django one doesn't help me too much if I want to just using single search field. And what I did is I found this lovely package called Django QL. So what it does is just basically they give you some auto completions on search, and most importantly, they supporting the search field by singular. And you can combine with some logical operation like equal to true or whatever you like for primaries. But okay, so it seems like you guys enjoy the party a lot. Anyway, yeah, so I find this Django QL package, and all of the guideline is really simple. It's just adding this Django QL search mixin if you import it and install it in your server. And then I try to saying I search this session ID in local, just putting there. And then I run this benchmark again using Django debug to enable. Yeah, so here's the example. Just I search one of the fields, just get the results back. And here comes the results. So probably you don't see it really carefully. So it's back to 135 milliseconds. I think before that it's 800 milliseconds. I think it's really huge improvement to me, which is I like it. I'm quite happy so far. And then I move to the next problem, which is the listing page optimization. Just back to the SQL queries again. I'm not sure you guys see it clearly, but here I explain is you can see there's two select counts, and it's also mentioning in the debug tool that it's a duplicate 2 times. And there's also one of the thing, it's the ordering, taking a lot of time or was a large portion of the response height to that. So I do some research and optimize that. And the things I have, it's this one. The first one, I just show you guys this parameter in the model admin, which is called show for result counts. So what it does is like they count it if you having the listing page and showing what's the match object, they would just do a count for you, like what's the number of match. But the problem is if you're using a really large model, using select count might not be optimal because it will taking a lot of resource to generating the query and get back the results, which is I learn a really hard lessons on that sometimes. And since in our project, we don't really need to know a full counts most of the time. So what I decided to do is just disable that, and which is like the code is coming behind, and also the sorting and the paginator one, it's also hurting your performance sometimes, especially on the large data sets like millions or 10 millions of records. So you might want to consider the switching a little bit or tweaking a bit on the Django admin model if you're keen to using it. Yeah, so here's my change, which is I decided just doing the turn off for this. Oh, it's okay. Yeah, so just using this force to turn it off to show the full result counts. And for the paginator one, in most of the time, I don't really need those results. So I just decided to create this dummy paginator, and which is always return 100. The default paginator one, which is like doing the select count, which is you sorted early to count the exact results for the table. As I mentioned before, it's quite expensive, and I don't really need the exact number, so I decided to switching a dummy paginator. But you guys might ask, what if I want to get more closing numbers? So I also found this. This is how I configure the paginator, and you can also consider using this like estimated count paginator. So because we're using Postgres in our project, so Postgres have this query to counting like numbers of rows in the table, which is also gives you a really good results if you just want to estimate the number of the records. But please be mindful that this estimated count may not be updated really frequently because in Postgres, I'm not sure in other database, but in Postgres, it's normally updated if they run auto vacuum, which is like clean up the resource and doing all those analytics. You can have a try, but be careful what you can get. May not be really accurate estimated count because that's what it is. Yeah, and there's other thing I noticed that is this filtering parts on the listing page. And I'm actually really surprised. It actually takes quite a long time when I'm doing a second run today or yesterday. I noticed that this filtering part, if it's not indexed correctly, or if it's getting really causing table, so it actually doing a count distinct on the whole table, which is, if you have a large data set, it's not optimal as well. So how do you resolve it, this type of, but you still want to keep the filter, how do you resolve it? The way I did is for demonstration purpose, I just create a really custom filtering class to return a static value, so we don't have to rely on using the SQL query to getting the unique results. But you can also create another table or just using a foreign key to getting those value, which is using a smaller table to return those value as well, which I won't go further, but the key thing is you can using a slightly simple filtering method instead of using a select count for large datasets. To override the default filtering, you can just simply put in the class, and the Django admin will handle it for you. So after all these changes are done, and I run the listing page results again. So right now it's close to 32 milliseconds. I think at the beginning it's 180 or 70 something. I think it's quite a huge improvement, and I think it's scaled it really well in that case. Yeah, I think it's pretty much solving those performance problems. Okay, so that's pretty much my talk. Here's the summary. I would strongly suggest you guys to look at this Django QL to optimizing your search query if you have large datasets, or maybe you want to use it more often for different operations. And also consider to remove some ordering fields or default ordering on a Django model. The third thing is use customer paginator and turn off this show for results if you really don't need it. And we just try to avoid this expensive count query. And if you have a really large table, you might also want to try to customize the filtering to avoid some of the expensive scan filtering. Yeah, that's pretty much the talk is. I hope you guys enjoy and enjoy the weekends, but don't deploy on Friday. Anyone have a question?
Yeah, this is really awesome, especially the pagination stuff.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have problems with that kind of stuff. My only question is this, that when you subclass the paginator and you're implementing a cached property, so why don't you just call the super inside it so that it runs the original query, and maybe you can cache it to maybe Redis for 60 seconds, and then that expensive query would only run once every 60 seconds for all of your admin users or something like that. It might be a little more accurate. It might be a lot more accurate than the estimate that you're getting from the table.
Yeah, I quite agree your idea, because I never thought that way. But because in my situation, I don't need those accurate counting most of the time. Sometimes I'm just looking into my data warehouse to get the number of the records we needed. But yeah, I strongly agree that we can just cache in one of the query results, maybe probably 24 hours or 48 hours. I think it's sufficient. Yeah, I think it's a solid one. That's definitely correct. Because I think even using select count for large table, you're taking a lot of resource. If you running in production, I'm not sure what could go wrong, which is yeah.
The other option is that you could subclass that count and run it on a read replica or something.
Yeah, I think that's a really solid suggestion. Thanks. Anyone?
Just one caveat, you need the same thing, but if you're using the count under 100 by default, it's not paginate, so it'll start showing all the records. So your dummy pagination should be 100 or more, just in case.
Yeah, that's also a really solid point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't need the count, that's what we need. So,
Yeah. Anyone? Yeah, that's right.
For the section where you're showing the filtered values for the different columns where they exist.
Yeah.
So use things like either caching or you can use materialized views in Postgres to actually pre-distinct those amounts basically and figure out to refresh them within Postgres without needing to add something else to your stack for caching.
Yeah.
That instead of the actual raw big table.
Yeah, that's totally agree. Because the approach I'm using is like I actually using a small table to curate it to get back the results I needed. Yeah, but if you don't want to separate to a different table, you can also using a cache one to cache the distinct results.
You can materialize views. You don't need to code it. You just write your query the way you've done it.
Yeah, yeah.
Just tell it when to refresh. And so you get the best of both worlds as far as you're looking at a source of truth and you're controlling sort of when that changes.
That's a good solution.
When you're using it in conjunction with filters, Postgres won't be able, like that computerized view won't be very accurate.
You may be obsolete.
Yeah, like let's say that I only use
Depends on how often they change.
Yeah, but like the materialized view, then you do more about switches. It's not just the one number per table, I'm guessing. It's the count that you're getting as it from a result of applying different filters on a collection.
It's dynamic. It's not just a list of values of a model.
That's what my understanding is.
Yeah, maybe we can have a talk after this. Maybe a next lightning talk could be. Yeah, but thank you guys for suggestion and hope you guys enjoyed it.
Okay, thank you, Oliver, for a great talk. I couldn't agree more on the point where you shouldn't be using the ordering fields in Meta. I've run into many problems there. Okay, coming up next is Ivan talking to us about green programming.
Yeah, I'm an issue with the name.
Come on, we do this every day.
Yeah, I could have done better. Okay.
Take it away.
Yeah. So my name is Ivan. I work for Cover Genius, Cover.com team, and this is a green programming talk. And even though it's like a bit more, basically it's a fun talk really, but it's still based on a study conducted by a group of researchers from Portugal. And as you can see, they work in different Portuguese universities, so it gives hope that they actually know what they're talking about. And yeah, this is the QR code of the study that they published. You'll see it along the slide, so don't worry about it right now. And they used the benchmark, which called the computer language benchmarks game. It's basically a set of algorithms written in different programming languages. People use it for testing the performance, but these people use it for testing the energy efficiency of programming languages. Okay, and we'll jump straight to the results actually, because it's a lightning talk. And yeah, here in Cover Genius, we mainly using PHP and Python languages. And as you can see, they're not like really energy efficient, I'd say. Comparing to C, who kind of the best energy efficient languages, PHP 20 times more, less energy efficient, and Python is almost 76 times less energy efficient. And kind of the same happening in terms of time execution, 27 and 71 accordingly, PHP and Python, and just actually better on the memory consumption, but still, you know, it's not really difficult to talk here. Yeah, and they also brought it into 4 different categories. And as you can see, PHP Python is somewhere in the middle and still not doing very good, really. And C on top of all categories, as expected. Pascal is surprisingly very good. Should we use Pascal? Probably not, but still, it's a very good choice if you want to save some energy. So like, and yeah, it's all very interesting, right? But like, what's in it for us? Because in Cover Genius, we mostly develop web APIs, and for a very long time, energy consumption has been a concern for people who like develop software for microcontrollers, which are work in battery-powered devices, or people who develop mobile applications or desktop even, but not APIs, really, because they work on servers, they somewhere in the cloud, they plug into the wall. Who really cares? Probably no one. Yeah, like, but just until recently, because like, here's the AI steps in, and I'm pretty sure some of you have seen at least one of these articles when they say like AI is pushing the world to an energy crisis, or that in the US, estimated power consumption by AI will jump to 8% from 3 in 2022, and ChatGPT consumes 25 times more energy than Google, or like Vox reports that AI already uses as much energy as a small country. And probably someone came across these articles that ChatGPT and Microsoft planning to go nuclear to power its AI ambitions. Yeah, that's a bit crazy actually, to power the AI with nuclear power, but nonetheless, that's where we are. So yeah, and like as any engineer at some point in time, like we want to rewrite stuff in different languages, right? So I was thinking, like, what if OpenAI team will get it together and will just rewrite ChatGPT in the most energy efficient way in C, no other languages? Like, what did they come up with? And of course, with me being very responsible energy consumer, I decided to ask ChatGPT about it. And first question was like, what are languages used in ChatGPT primarily? And as you can see, it's Python, C++, CUDA, SQL, and we don't really care about JavaScript here, and front-end languages. Sorry. And yeah, and like from here, it looks very promising. If we were to rewrite Python code in C, we can save the heaps of energy and save lots of money for OpenAI, because that's what we're doing here. Yeah, but like we're not really there yet. So I wanted to ask, like, how much each language used in single prompt, and like. Here, pictures even more promising, like Python, almost 90% for each prompt, C++, 5-10%, CUDA, 5-10%, SQL, 1-3, and yeah, like, don't really care about the rest. But like, it's still not really giving us the picture that we want. So I asked how the energy distributed between languages for a single prompt. Yeah, and here is speech not really looking very promising already, with CUDA taking 70% of the energy for each prompt, Python 20-30%, C++ 5-10, and yeah, like SQL is very little, so we stopped caring about SQL from now on. And yeah, so I asked ChatGPT to convert the percentages into watt-hours to kind of have an understanding of what kind of numbers we're dealing with here. And from here, we actually can take numbers from the study, which is shown you before, and came up with like very simple formula. So as it is now, taking these numbers per single prompt, ChatGPT consumes 0.75 watt-hours. And let's do a simple math here. Like CUDA is written in C++, so we might as well think that it's C++, even though it's not really, but just let's say it is for the experiment. C++ it has had an index of 1.34 comparing to C. Python was 75 more, and yeah, SQL is so little that I don't really care about that. And if we were to replace the numbers from the, if we were to replace numbers with like C indexes, we would come up with almost twice less of energy consumption comparing to the languages that the origin is written from. Yeah, like, does it really worth it? I don't know, because it's like huge amount of work. First it was probably CUDA, like OpenAI will have to just go to NVIDIA and ask, guys, can you please do this? And NVIDIA will be like, yeah, no problem. And what we came up with a solution in what, like in a couple of years probably or whatever. And yeah, it's more of a question to OpenAI accountants and engineers, whether it's worth it or not. Yeah, but I thought it would be interesting to do the math and to kind of talk about this this funny thing. Yeah, so that's it from me. Thank you, everyone, and heads up to the next speaker. Yeah, any questions? Yeah, Sergey. They power in our trucks. We need them. So yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah.
Having said that, I think we really need to consider like the whole life cycle of software, because usually like these comparisons are done in very like coding programs, and they don't really give us data that would be useful in like a real world scenario where you really need to consider like how performant is as a software in Python versus C, for example, given like reasonable, like comparable amount of effort. And usually what happens is that, you know, performance is driven by the like more higher level architectural decisions. And if a lower level language makes it harder to move towards those architectural decisions, then you're going to end up with a solution that, even though it runs faster, like as in a program, maybe it's not the most green language. So I think we have to consider that.
Yeah, 100%. Like, get into the beginning of the question. I think like you can confirm with the recruiters here that no one really cares about, you know, how efficient the code is. Probably it's like the least of your concern, guys. Getting back to the energy, yeah, you're right. And I was talking only about the runtime energy consumption. We're not talking about like development energy consumption. I was working with C++ for like a few years, and it can take up to 2 hours to compile your project, which is kind of which is still your local machine and not the cloud, but still. And even though like we're not really taking into consideration the learning process of the models, which probably takes some energy as well. Yeah, so like, but still have in mind, this is data from ChatGPT, so I wouldn't really take it very seriously. Yeah, so like, let's answer to the questions. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, great, thank you.
All right, thank you guys. So I'm your host, and I will be doing the last lightning talk of tonight as well. So today I'm going to talk about cleaning up in Python. All of these topics, we have gone into so much depth into Python, into Django. We're just going to return to the basic on our final talk. Oh, and this presentation is going to present to you in dark mode. Anyway, imagine if you are a library author and you have this resource, let's call it a connection, that you expect people to call open, and then they can do their things, and then they have to close when they're finished, right? So here we could see the user creating a connection instance, do something with it, open the connection and do something with it, and then close it. And he would expect that to work, but you could see do something here actually raises an exception. So you see the connection is open, but the do something raises an exception, so the close is never called. All right. So in this situation, what could you do? We want to open the connection. We want to do something that might or might not succeed. And then when we're done with it, we want to ensure whether that thing succeeds or not. we want to close the connection. What could we do here? You want to take a guess? No?
Try catch finally.
There we go. Try catch finally, right? So as just like in most of the languages these days, you have this try catch and finally statement. In Python here, we don't really, in this situation, we don't really care about handling the exception. We just want to ensure that connection is closed. So we could just use try. We do something with try, and then we can call connection.close in the finally calls, right? But now you're the author. That's nice. Your code is very short. But look at what your user have to do. They have to write 6 ugly lines of code to invoke your API. Guys, we're not doing Java here. So there's got to be a better way, right? This situation is actually very similar to how you would be dealing with files, right? And in Python 101, they teach you to use the with statement. Does anyone know what is behind with statement? You go? Context managers, right? And in context manager, in this example, you open the file, and when you exit the context manager, open doesn't really do anything. It opens the file. And when you read the file, when you exit the context manager, it will automatically close it for you, right? And to implement the context manager protocol, you just need to implement the dunder enter method, which will be run when you enter the context manager, and dunder exit method, which will be executed when you get out of the context manager. All right. So here you can see we implemented those 2 methods, and our API users could just use the with statement, wrap around the whatever they want to do, and then it would automatically close the connection for them when they're done. All right. And so now they'll be happy, but we could do better here. What if this do something function, rather than having to use a context manager, itself knows to open a connection and close the connection after it's done? What could we do in that scenario? Anyone else? All right, you go.
Disconnect the decorator.
Yes, a decorator. Right? So here you can see to implement a decorator in a class, you basically implement the dunder call method, within which you return a decorated method. Here we call it wrapped, within which we bring in back the try finally, you open the connection, and then within try, you do the actual thing, and then you close the connection. That's great. But then there's going to be people who use my API that wants to use it as a context manager. And there's going to be people who's on the side of decorators. What do you do? Okay, we just do both, right? So just let's bring back enter and exit. And we also implement dunder call. But could anyone see a small problem here? I'm repeating myself a little bit by calling open and close in the dunder call method, right? So we could actually just invoke the context manager in the dunder call method using the with statement, just like that. And now our connection class could be used as a context manager or as a decorator. That's really neat. Now let's look at this dunder call again. You see, dunder call doesn't need to actually know anything about open and close. It just needs to invoke itself as a context manager, right? It's so that it will call enter and exit. So following the do not repeat yourself principle, we could take this out and turn it into a mixin class. Right? We could take down the call method out, and we're just calling it context decorator because it turns context managers into a decorator. Right? So now for any context managers, as long as you inherit context decorator, your context manager will also act like a decorator. All right? And congratulations, we just invented contextlib.contextDecorator. This is actually a built-in function in Python, in the standard lib. And you can, if you're your user and then you found a lousy API that does not allow you to use the context manager as a decorator, you could implement your own class by subclassing that context manager and then mix in with the context decorator, and then you can use it as both. And that is all. Any questions? All right, that is the final talk of the night. Adam, you want to announce something after?
Used in any of our projects.
Sorry?
In any of our projects.
No, not really. I just found it on Monday, and I prepared the talk yesterday. So,
Actually use the one.
yeah, think transaction.atomic in Django. It's similar to this one.
I want to say, Aaron, that was very elegantly presented,
Thank you.
especially the dark.
Thank you.
Dark team is the best. Cool. That's pretty much it for tonight. Thanks everyone for attending, and hope to see everyone for on 25th of September. And yeah, we can stay a little bit and have more and page pizza if you want. With microwave, it's already open. Yeah, thanks everyone.